The market square on planet Zarnok buzzed with cruel laughter and loud voices. A crowd of aliens, covered in armor and robes, stood packed together, staring at the auction stage in the center. On that stage stood a girl, thin, dirty, and trembling. Her skin was pale blue, and one leg ended just below the knee. A metal ring was locked around her ankle, but it had no purpose. She had only one leg left. The auctioneer, a thick-bodied alien with wrinkled skin and sharp teeth, shouted above the noise, "Half price for the one-legged slave. She's no good for mining, but maybe she can clean floors with one hand." The crowd roared with laughter. Some threw old food at the girl. Others shouted out jokes. "Will she crawl or hop to work?" One alien yelled, making the crowd howl again. The girl didn't flinch. She just stared at the ground, face blank, but her eyes burned with quiet fire. She had stopped hoping long ago. Now she only waited. For her next owner, for pain, for orders. But then the laughter died. A tall figure stepped forward, moving through the crowd without saying a word. He was not like the others. His skin was pink, not blue or green. He wore a long dark coat that moved with the wind. A human. The only human in the crowd. He walked straight toward the auction stage. The auctioneer noticed and smiled, thinking he could finally get rid of the girl. "You there? You want her? I'll give you a deal half the price of a cleaning bot." The human said nothing. His face was calm, eyes unreadable. He simply raised his hand. The crowd stared in shock. "You serious?" The auctioneer asked, laughing. "You want her? With that missing leg? She's barely worth the collar she's wearing." The human finally spoke. His voice was low but clear. "She's still standing." The auctioneer blinked. "What?" "I sighed." The human repeated, "She's still standing." "That means she's worth more than all of you." Gasps and laughter filled the air. Some aliens shouted in anger. Others just laughed harder. But the girl slowly raised her head. She looked at the man. No one had ever said anything like that before. No one had ever defended her, not once. The auctioneer shrugged. "She's yours." "Fool. Hope you enjoy cleaning up after her." The collar unlocked with a beep, and a guard pushed the girl forward. She nearly fell but caught herself. She limped forward, dragging her weak leg behind her. The human turned and walked away, not looking back. She followed him, confused and unsure. As they left the crowd, the auctioneer leaned forward and whispered, "To the human, you'll regret this. That thing is broken inside. You can't fix what's already ruined." The human didn't answer. He just kept walking. The girl tried to keep up with his pace but stumbled. She was ready to be hit, kicked, or yelled at. But none of that happened. The man slowed down and looked back. "Can you walk?" he asked simply. She nodded, too afraid to speak. "Good," he said. "We're not far." They reached a quiet transport ship at the edge of the market. The human opened the door and helped her inside. She stared at him, confused. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice rough. He looked at her and said, "Nothing." Her hand shook. "Are you going to chain me?" "No." "Work me until I drop?" "No." "Then, why did you buy me?" she asked, her voice louder now, mixed with fear and pain. The human looked her in the eyes. "Because someone should have bought my daughter, but no one did." The words hit her like a rock. She didn't understand what he meant, but something about his voice made her believe it came from a deep place of pain. He walked into another room and left her alone. She sat on the edge of a small bed, still unsure if this was a trick. Still waiting for the pain to begin, but it didn't come. And for the first time in a long, long while, she started to wonder if her story might not end the same way it always had. A human's decision. The room was quiet, but her heart was not. She sat on the edge of the bed, still tense, still ready to run. Not that she could run far, not with one leg and no crutch. But the fear was still alive inside her, strong and sharp. She didn't trust him. No one who ever bought her had shown kindness. Not truly. She had learned long ago, kindness always had a price. Yet here she was, not in a cage. Not in chains. Just sitting. On a real bed. When the door slid open, she flinched. The human entered carrying a tray. On it was a bowl of soup, warm bread, and water. Real food. Not slave rations. He set it down in front of her without saying a word. She stared at it but didn't move. After a long pause, he said, "Eat, then rest." She narrowed her eyes. Why? The human didn't answer immediately. He sat down across from her, calm, patient, like he wasn't in a hurry to get anything from her. "You asked me why I bought you," he finally said. "I didn't buy you. I freed you." "There's a difference." She shook her head. "There's no such thing. Freedom is for the rich. The whole galaxy knows that." He looked at her again, this time longer. Then he reached into his coat and took out a small object, a hologram disc. He clicked it on. A soft blue light floated in the air. A moving image. A girl. She had the same soft blue skin. 2 legs, a wide smile, and eyes that looked full of light. "That was my daughter," he said. "Her name was Lyra. She was taken during a mining raid. I was off-world. By the time I found her, she was already gone." The girl stared at the image. The resemblance to her was shocking. Same ears. Same cheeks. The same fire in the eyes. "She looked like me," the girl whispered. "Yes," he replied. "That's why I stopped. But it's not why I stayed." She blinked. "Stayed? Stayed long enough to raise my hand. Stayed long enough to ignore the laughter. To walk away with you." She frowned. "Then why? If not because I look like her," he leaned back, "because you were still standing. You had no leg, no hope. And still, you stood while they mocked you. My daughter had that same fire. That's not something you can buy. That's something that can change everything if someone believes in it." She looked down. Her voice broke. "No one has ever believed in me. Not once." "Well, the human said softly, "Then let me be the first." Tears rolled down her cheeks, hot and silent. She wiped them quickly, ashamed. But he didn't laugh. He didn't speak. He simply slid the tray closer and left the room. She ate. The next day, she expected him to give orders. But instead, he handed her a package. Inside was a simple prosthetic leg, not fancy, but strong and adjustable. She stared at it like it was magic. He knelt down and helped her fit it. No anger, no judgment, only focus. "Why are you doing this?" she asked again, softer this time. "I told you," he said. "Because someone should have done this for Lyra." When she stood, shaky, clumsy, but standing on both feet for the first time in years, he simply said, "That's more like it." She looked at him, truly looked. His face was tired, his eyes full of grief. But behind all of that, something gentle lived there. For the first time in her life, she felt a question inside her she had never dared ask before. What if I am worth something? But the moment was cut short when a warning light blinked on the control screen. An alert. Someone was approaching the ship. The human checked the signal. His eyes narrowed. "They followed us," he muttered. "Who?" she asked. He looked at her. "The traitor. The one who sold you." Her blood turned cold. The man turned and walked to the door. But before he opened it, he said something that made her knees weak. "They're not taking you back. Not now. Not." Ever asterisk the girl's fear, she woke to silence. A strange kind of silence. Not the hollow silence of a slave cage, but the soft stillness of safety. It was almost louder than noise. Her eyes blinked open, expecting chains, dark ceilings, or orders barked into her ear. But there were none. She sat up, confused. The blanket was clean. The room was small but warm. It even smelled of real food. Her body ached, but it wasn't from beatings this time. It was from using muscles she hadn't used in years. Yesterday, she had stood on 2 feet again. It still felt like a dream, but she didn't trust dreams. She slipped out of bed slowly and limped across the room. Her prosthetic leg wobbled under her weight, but she managed to stay up. As she reached the door, she paused. Her breath quickened. What if today was the day he showed his true face? She stepped out. The hallway was empty. She moved quietly, like prey, following the soft hum of the ship. The lights were low. Everything felt too calm. Her fingers shook as she touched the wall for balance. Then she heard something, a low voice. Speaking behind a half-closed door, she moved closer. Heart racing. It was the human. Talking to someone. But there was no one else there. I should have reached her sooner. I should have listened. The girl peeked in. He was sitting alone, a small photo disc glowing in his hand, the same one from yesterday. Lyra's image shimmered in the air above it. His voice cracked as he said, I found one that looks like you. But she's not you. She's still here, though. Still breathing. The girl stepped back, her mind spinning. So I was a replacement after all. That night, she didn't eat. She sat by the window, staring into the stars. He saved me. Because I reminded him of someone else. That's it. Her heart felt heavy. She thought she was beginning to matter. She thought he saw her. But maybe it was all a mistake. Old thoughts crept back in. Thoughts she knew too well. You're nothing. Just a shadow. Just a tool. Replaceable. By morning, her plan was clear. She would leave. No chains meant no guards. If she could slip out of the ship, maybe she could vanish on the next planet. She didn't know where she'd go, but anywhere was better than being someone's ghost. She moved quietly to the cargo ramp. The ship was parked on a rocky moon now, away from cities. Her new leg thudded softly against the floor. She winced with every step. Her body screamed in pain, but her mind screamed louder. Just go. Before he starts to look at you with pity instead of purpose. But when she reached the control panel to open the ramp, she saw something strange. A small box sat nearby, open. Inside it, tools, spare parts, and a second brand-new prosthetic leg. Custom fitted. Built by hand. For her. Not for his daughter. For her. There was a note, scribbled in shaky handwriting. In case you want to run, but I hope you stay. She stared at the words, frozen. He knew she might leave. And still, he gave her the freedom to choose. Her knees buckled. She sat on the floor, the cold metal beneath her body suddenly real again. But her heart didn't feel cold anymore. It felt confused, heavy, full. The door behind her opened. The human stood there, silent. She turned around slowly. You think I'm your daughter, she said, voice sharp. No, he replied. You're not her. You're you. That's why I gave you the better leg. Because I'm not trying to rebuild my past. I'm trying to help you build a future. She didn't know what to say. No one had ever given her a future before. She stood up, slowly, on her own, and said just one thing. I'm not going anywhere. A past revealed for the first time. The girl stayed because she wanted to. She no longer looked over her shoulder. She no longer waited for chains or cruel orders. Each day, she trained with the human, walking, balancing, stretching her legs, and learning how to stand taller, steadier. At first, she fell often. The prosthetic hurt. Her muscles burned. But every time she fell, he helped her up without a word. No anger. No sighs. Just a hand, held out, waiting. And that changed everything. She started asking questions. Small ones, then bigger ones. His name was Dirin. He was from Earth, what was left of it. A soldier once, then a father. Now, just a man trying to keep a promise no one else understood. The girl he called her Kale was still learning how to accept that name. She had never had one before. Just numbers, tags, collars. Now, someone had given her a name, and it sounded strange and beautiful every time he said it. But still, one thing haunted her. The picture of Lyra. One night, Kale sat beside the small fire Dirin built outside the ship, both of them wrapped in silence and starlight. She had waited long enough. Her voice broke the quiet. Do I really look like her? Dirin didn't move at first. Then he nodded slowly. At first, I thought you were her. My heart, it played tricks on me. Kale stared into the fire. Do you miss her? Every day. She hesitated. What happened to her? Dirin's jaw clenched. His eyes stared hard at the flames, as if trying to burn away a memory. I was off-world on a mission. Pirates raided the colony, took captives. I didn't make it back. In time. Kale stayed silent. I searched every pit, every slave port, every black market ring I could find. He continued, his voice rough. I found her name on a list confirmed dead. Worked to death in the mines, just another forgotten girl. Number. Rescue, no justice. He turned to her, his eyes finally meeting hers. I didn't save her. So when I saw you, half broken, standing alone while they laughed, I saw another chance. Not to fix what I lost, but to stop the galaxy from taking one more girl. Kale's throat tightened. She looked away, afraid tears might fall. I'm not her, she whispered. I know, he said gently. You're not her, you're you. But that doesn't mean you don't matter. A long silence followed. Then she asked something she had never dared before. Can I become something more than a slave? Dirin didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood and walked into the ship. A moment later, he came back holding something wrapped in cloth. He handed it to her. She opened it slowly. Inside was a small metal badge, old, scratched, with Earth's symbol on it. My unit gave this to me, Dirin said. For courage. For standing when no one else would. He looked at her with steady eyes. Now it's yours. Kale stared at the badge in her hands, her breath caught in her chest. I haven't earned this. You stood when you had no reason to, Dirin said softly. You kept standing even when the world tried to crush you. That's more courage than most soldiers I've ever known. Tears fell freely now. In that moment, something inside her changed. She wasn't someone's slave. She wasn't a mistake. She wasn't a replacement. She was Kale. And maybe, just maybe, she could become a protector too. But peace never lasted. Long on the edge of the stars, a transmission came through. Dirin stepped away to read it. Kale watched his face change. What is it? She asked. He looked at her with tight lips. The auctioneer. He's coming. And he's bringing guards. Kale's fists tightened. He wants me back? Dirin nodded. And he won't ask twice. Kale stood up, balanced now, stronger. Then she said something no slave had ever dared say. Then let him come. Learning. To stand, the wind howled across the rocky surface of the moon, dust dancing like angry spirits. Inside the ship, Kale stood still, her new leg planted firmly, her eyes locked on her reflection in the glass. The girl she saw wasn't the broken thing from the auction block anymore. She was leaner now, sharper, stronger. Still scarred, still healing, but no longer afraid. She turned away and stepped into the main deck where Dirin waited, checking weapons, adjusting power shields, preparing quietly. They'll land by nightfall, he said without looking up. Kale didn't flinch. Let them. Dirin glanced at her, reading her face. This isn't about pride. If we run now, we can vanish. I know places they'll never reach. Kale shook her head. If I run again, I'm still a slave, just one with longer chains. He stared at her for a moment, then nodded once. Not with approval, but with respect. The day passed in quiet preparation. Kale trained harder. She practiced balancing, shifting weight, kicking with her prosthetic until her muscles screamed. Darren showed her how to hold a shock baton, how to breathe during a fight, how to move without being predictable. Pain is information, he said, correcting her stance. It tells you what to fix, not when to stop. She didn't speak. She only trained, again. And again. As evening fell, they saw the ship coming, a black fang in the sky. The same traitor, the same monster who once laughed at her missing leg. And now he was bringing guards. Real ones. Armed and armored. Kale stood at the top of the ramp, staring into the growing dark. The traitor stepped out, smug as ever. So? He grinned. My little half-price mistake thinks she can fight back. Cute. Kale said nothing. Darren stepped forward. You're trespassing. She's free now. The traitor snorted. She's property. She was never bought properly? That? Sale was invalid, and I brought proof. He tossed a data pad. Legal codes flickered on screen. A loophole. A trick. Something dirty. Darren read it, jaw tight. This is garbage. It's enough to take her, the traitor said, waving his guards forward. By force if needed. Darren raised his weapon. Kale stepped in front of him. No, she said. I'll fight this time. Darren hesitated, then stepped aside. The traitor laughed. You can barely walk, girl. Go back to your owner. Kale raised her baton. I don't have one. The guards. Lunged. What followed was chaos. But Kale was ready. She dodged the first strike, letting her prosthetic carry her weight. She slammed the baton into a guard's side, dropped low, and rolled behind another. Pain burned through her leg, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Not anymore. She had fought to breathe, to stand, to exist. She wasn't losing that now. Traitor screamed orders. His guards faltered. One fell. Then another. Darren fought at her side, but more like a partner than a protector. He didn't shield her, he let her fight, and she did. Every blow, every step, every deflection felt like cutting off another chain. When the last guard fell, the traitor backed away, shaking. This is theft. You'll be punished for this. Kale
limped forward, breathing hard.
Her eyes locked on his. I was stolen first, she said. Now I'm taking myself back. The traitor sneered and pressed a hidden signal one. Last call for backup. More were coming. But Kale didn't feel fear. She turned to Darren. Then we stand again. Together. And in that moment, Darren finally smiled. Not out of pride, not out of victory, but because he saw it. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living, and she was ready for whatever came. Next asterisk, the worth of one life. They came at dawn. Not with warnings. Not with words only, with fire and force. 4 transport ships landed across the rocky field like beasts preparing to feed. Soldiers in black armor spilled out, weapons humming with power. The air turned thick with dust and danger. Above it all, the traitor stood again, his long cloak whipping in the wind, eyes burning with revenge. He raised his hand and pointed. Bring the girl. Kill the man. Inside the ship, Kale watched the dark shapes move toward them. Her hands didn't tremble. Not anymore. She strapped on her new brace, adjusted the grip on her baton, and looked at Darren. We can't win, she said calmly. No, Darren replied. But we can show them why they'll never forget us. They stepped out together. The guards shouted demands. Kale didn't move. Darren stood at her side. 2 small figures facing a swarm. One soldier called out, Drop your weapons. Kale didn't flinch. You dropped your soul the day you chained children. There was no more talking after that. The first wave charged. Duran fired controlled blasts, never wasting a shot. Kale moved like lightning, low, fast, unbreaking. Her prosthetic leg clanged with every strike, but it held. She used it like a weapon, sweeping, kicking, slamming. They tried to surround her. She broke through. One guard aimed for Duran. Kale dove, crashing into him, disarming him with raw force. Another slammed her to the ground. Her head hit rock. Blood trickled. Pain screamed through her body. The guard raised his weapon to finish her, but then her fingers closed around something in the dirt, not a gun. Sharp piece of broken metal. She didn't hesitate. She struck. Guard dropped. She stood again, bleeding, bruised, still standing. The soldiers began to slow. They weren't just facing two rebels. They were facing something terrifying. A girl with nothing left to lose. The traitor snarled, stepping forward himself. Now? Enough, she's mine. Kale looked at him, hair matted with blood, breath ragged. And then she laughed. Not a slave's laugh. A warrior's laugh. You still think I'm worth half a price? She called out. He raised his weapon, shaking. You're nothing. Duran stepped in front of her. Wrong. He pointed to the field where soldiers lay groaning, others hesitating, unsure. She's everything. Then something unexpected happened. From the cliffs nearby, shadows moved. Locals, miners, traders, people who had watched quietly for days. Some had been at the auction. Some had laughed once, but now they were angry. One by one, they stepped forward. Some carried tools. Others just their fists. And one of them shouted, She's not going back. The trader spun around. This is illegal. She belongs to me. Another voice yelled, She belongs to no one. Then the crowd surged, not toward Kale and Duran, but toward the trader and his guards. The soldiers were overwhelmed not by weapons, but by the weight of truth. By people who had finally opened their eyes, who saw the worth of one broken girl, and stood behind her. The traitor tried to run, but this time there was nowhere left to hide. Kale didn't chase him. She didn't have to. He was dragged down by the very crowd he once sold to. When the dust settled, she stood beside Duran. Battered. But whole. He looked at her. You fought like a soldier. She smiled for the first time without fear. I fought like a person. Asterisk, she stands. They run. Smoke curled into the pale morning sky, rising from broken ships and scattered gear. The field that had once echoed with the stomping boots of armed enforcers was now quiet. Guards lay disarmed. The traitor was gone, dragged away in chains by the very people he once commanded. No slave collars, no auction bells, no cruel voices remained. Kale stood at the center of it all. She didn't lean on Duran. She didn't need to. Her prosthetic leg was scratched, her clothes torn, her face bruised, but her eyes burned with something no one could take from her now, freedom earned. The locals who had watched her fight stepped back, unsure of what to say. They had cheered for her, fought beside her. But now they looked at her as if seeing something holy, something rare. Duran walked beside her, quiet, proud. He didn't speak. He knew she didn't need his words anymore. Kale turned to the crowd. Her voice was steady. You all saw what they did to me. You've seen what they've done to hundreds like me. No one spoke. You laughed, she continued. You watched, and you said nothing. Heads dropped. Shame rippled across the crowd. But today, she said, louder now, you stood up. You stopped them. And that means you're not too late, not yet. A heavy silence followed. Then a woman stepped forward, holding a child in her arms. Her voice shook. What do we do now? Kale looked around at the broken land, the scattered chains, the fear still clinging to these people's faces. You fight, she said, not with weapons, but with refusal. Refuse to sell. refused to own, refused to let this galaxy decide who matters. The woman nodded slowly. So did others. Darren stepped up beside Kale and placed his old Earth badge in her hand, the one he had once given her in the quiet firelight. "It's time," he said. "You know where this belongs." Kale took a deep breath. The next day, she returned to the place where it all began, the auction block. But this time, she wasn't led there in chains. She walked there by choice. The platform was empty now. Dust covered the rails. The spot where she had once stood, mocked and broken, was still stained by years of cruelty. She climbed the steps. One by one, when she reached the top, she took the badge in her hand and pressed it into the wood, not as a mark of ownership, but as a warning, a symbol that never again. Behind her, a new ship landed. Refugees stepped out. Former slaves, the unwanted, the lost. She greeted each one with a nod. She knew their eyes. She knew their pain, but she also knew what came next, because if she could stand again, they could too. Kale stayed on that planet, not to hide, but to build. She and Darren turned the auction grounds into a home, not a shelter, a school, a training hall, a place where the broken became unbreakable. People from across the stars whispered her name, not in fear, but in hope. The girl who was once sold for half-price. Now priceless. Now legend.